Hey guys, so we're going to read the final chapter of Funny Frank, written by Dick King-Smith, illustrated by John Eastwood. Wow, it's been such a long, amazing journey with Frank, hasn't it? When we saw him as a chick and his interest in the pond and the ducks and his urge to want to swim, and then Jemima and her family being able to create the perfect wetsuit and flippers for him to be able to swim. And now finally he is an adult and he saved his mother from the fox. And also on top of that, he's starting to realize that, being a chicken isn't all that bad. I want to be who I am. So he's finally realizing that he is meant to be a chicken all along, isn't he? So let's check out chapter 12 and see what happens for him and how his life is going to end in a happily ever after situation. Chapter 12. The very next day, Jemima's father went to the market and found just what he'd been looking for. "Come and see what I've got for you," he said to his daughter when he arrived home. He took a crate out of the back of the Land Rover. "Oh, Dad!" cried Jemima. "Is it a girlfriend for Frank?" "Yes. What do you think of her?" Jemima lifted out of the crate a pullet of a particularly pretty color. So there's Jemima's dad with the crate with the girlfriend for Frank. So let's see what she looks like, huh? She was not brown like all the other hens in the flock. She was speckled, her white feathers covered in little black dots. "She's gorgeous," cried Jemima softly. "Shall I take her out and introduce her to Frank?" "I think I'd leave it till the morning," said Tom Tab. "It's getting late, and it'll be dark soon. Stick her in the old rabbit hutch for tonight with some food and water, and we'll put her out tomorrow." "Tomorrow," said Jemima. Mom's gonna take Frank's wetsuit and webs off." Wait till she has. Then. This little girl might get a bit of a shock if she meets Frank with all of his funny gear. "She won't get a shock," thought Jemima, as she lay in bed that night. "She'll probably think he looks really cool." The next morning, when she went to let the flock out, Jemima caught up Frank and carried him to the rabbit hutch. Frank looked in to see a vision of speckled beauty. He let out a strangled croak. It was love at first sight. The pullet's reaction at seeing him was rather different. She put her head on one side and regarded him with a bright eye. "Cooer," she said. You look pretty funny." "Funny ha-ha, or funny peculiar?" asked Frank. "Both," replied the pullet, and she turned her back on him. Frank looked crestfallen. "Don't worry," Jemima said to him. "Wait till you get all this old stuff off of you." So there's the new little pullet there with Jemima. Here's Frank just admiring the new pullet, and there she is, kind of confused by his get-up that he's got on. With the help of her mother, she unstuck the wetsuit and took off the artificial webs. Then Jemima took Frank out into the orchard and let him go. "Hope he doesn't try to swim now," she thought, ready to rescue him if he should. But grown-up Frank seemed to have more sense. To be sure, he waded a little way into the pond with his long legs to say good morning to his web-footed friends, but no farther. Then he ran lightly off and began to scratch about in the grass with those sharp claws he'd never properly used, and gave himself a good dust bath, and shook his bright red feathers, hidden for so long under their rubber covering, and began thoroughly to preen himself. Then he jumped easily onto the top of the big log, stood up on his toes, puffed out his chest, and stretched his neck and crowed a loud, triumphant crow. Gertie had just re-entered the hen house to lay an egg when Mildred came dashing in. "Quickly, come quickly, dear," she screeched. "I have told you before, Mildred," began Gertie, but Mildred continued unabashed. "It's Frank," she cried. "You'll never guess," and she rushed out again. Frank, having been the bane of Gertie's life, was now, thanks to his saving of that life, the apple of her eye, and she forgot both her cry of triumph at laying and her dignity and went tearing after her friend. So there's Jemima watching Frank. There's Frank without his wetsuit on. And here he is crowing. "Where is he? What's happened? Is he all right?" she cried. And then she saw standing on the log by the pond a magnificent young red cockerel. "Who is he?" she thought. "Where's my Frank?" she said. "There, dear," said Mildred, "on the log. That's him. They've taken his clothes off. Isn't he handsome?" As she spoke, Frank gave another loud, triumphant crow. At that moment, Jemima came out carrying the speckled pullet and put her down on the grass and watched her scamper toward the new Frank and stop by the log to gaze up at him. "Hello, handsome," said the pullet. "Where have you been all my life?" "Inside a wetsuit," thought Frank. "I think we've met before," he gulped. "We certainly have not," replied the speckled pullet. "The only guy I've met since I've arrived last evening was a weird-looking Wally dressed up as a duck. As different as you could be, lover boy." A lover boy, Frank thought. "Hope I don't meet him again," said the pullet. "You won't," said Frank. "He's gone. By the way, my name's Frank. What's yours?" So there's Gertie and Mildred running out to see Frank. And there's Frank and the new pullet talking. "Haven't really got a name," she said. "My mom just called us all Chick." Frank hopped off the log and stood beside her. I'd call you Gorgeous," he murmured softly. "I like it," cried the speckled pullet. "Sounds nice. You're Frank, I'm Gorgeous." "Oh my," said Mildred from where she and Gertie were standing. How should I love to know what they're saying?" Normally, Gertie would have replied to such a remark with a cutting answer such as, "The world would be a better place if everybody minded their own business." But now she stood in a kind of daze, staring at her handsome hero of a son and the new arrival. "She looks to be well-bred," she thought. "That speckled color is so distinguished. I bet she will lay the brownest of eggs." Then she saw the pullet run off down the orchard, pursued by her boy. "Don't they make a lovely couple, dear?" said Mildred. You'll be having more pretty grandchildren one of these fine days." "Mildred," said Gertie dreamily, "for once you're right." The rest of the flock had been staring too, first at Frank's new look, then at the very pretty pullet. The ducks, too, watched the proceedings with much interested quacking. "We miss Frank," those ducks that had once been the duckling friends said to their father, the big white drake. Do you think he'll ever come swimming with us again, Dad?" So there's Frank and the now newly named pullet, which her name is Gorgeous. And there they are again. We're just running down the orchard. Do you think he'll ever come swimming with us again, Dad? He will not, said the drake. However, there's nothing to stop you from walking out of the pond to go have a chat with him and his girlfriend whenever you want to. He's a nice boy, Frank is. But it wasn't wise of him to try to be a duck. Ducks are cleverer than chickens, you see. We can walk about and we can swim. Chickens can only walk about. They can't swim. That afternoon, Carrie Tabb tempted her brother-in-law, the vet, to come over for tea. She'd just made a fresh batch of fruit scones. And so the four of them, Tom, Carrie, Jemima, and her Uncle Ted, leaned on the orchard gate and watched as Frank strutted proudly past Gorgeous at his side. Funny Frank, wasn't he? Said Jemima. How do you mean, they said. Well, wanting to be a duck. He doesn't anymore, does he? He's found his true place, they said. And his true love, said Jemima, and they all smiled happily. Frank and Gorgeous stood wingtip to wingtip at the edge of the duck pond. So there's the white drake talking with the ducklings, or they're not ducklings anymore, about visiting Frank. And there's the Jemima and her family watching Frank and Gorgeous. Frank's friend swam by, loudly quacking his name in greeting. Poor things, said Gorgeous, tossing her pretty head. Splashing about in all that cold stuff. Why, water should only be for drinking. I suppose so, said Frank. But don't you ever think it would be nice to be able to swim? To swim? Cried Gorgeous. A chicken swimming? Oh, Frank, you are funny. And there they are watching the ducks in the pond. And that's the end of our book of Funny Frank. Oh my goodness. I can't believe that it's over, right? Anyways, I really hope that y'all enjoyed that story. Dick King-Smith, he's written lots of famous books. For one, the story of Babe the Gallant Pig. It's also a little film. Some of y'all may know it. But he wrote that story too. So there's lots of interesting little farming books that he's got. Anyways, I send all my love to y'all guys. And I hope to see y'all very soon. And please remember the class rules. Love yourself, love others. Bye-bye.